was a kid, I was obsessed with things being perfectly fair. Anybody else here just like been a justice seeker since you were just in the womb? Yeah. I always get a little scared when people cheer at that, because I'm like, I think we should all be a little bit scared of that person. But yeah, I just always, from the get-go, wanted things to be perfectly fair. And one day, my family and I were on a road trip, and my dad did the classic dad move. He pulled off an exit and turned into McDonald's, as you do. And my brother and I were in the back seat, and I want to show you a picture of my brother and I just so you can kind of get the gist of our relationship. We were always like 1 second away from a huge fight. I don't know if we have that photo, but we were always, just our whole childhood, like, it was like he said the wrong thing, I did the wrong thing, oh, there it is, yeah. So it looks really cute, but if you cannot tell, he is about to throw that ornament in my face. Yeah, like, just a lot of fighting. Some of you siblings know how that goes. So we're in the back seat together, we're 18 months apart, you know, rough times. I was maybe 5, 6, I don't really know. And I don't remember what I got to eat that day, but what I remember is that we both ordered an ice cream cone. And we both got the same size. But wouldn't you know it, one of them was bigger than the other. And I don't know if it was real or my little sister heart, but it looked like my brother's ice cream cone was bigger. And so he got that ice cream cone, and I was like, that's not fair. And so I did what any little sister would do, and I just took his ice cream cone from him. And then he did what any older brother would do, and he hit me in the stomach to get it back. And then, because he hit me, I got both ice cream cones. Which I think is pretty fair. But in all seriousness, some of us have maybe had this value system around fairness that we don't even know we have. So many of us have created values based on the principle of fairness, wanting everything to be equitable to everyone at all times. And the problem is, this isn't really the way of Jesus. Now, I know some of you, when I say that, you're like, I'm sorry, what did she just say? And that's what I said. Jesus wasn't fair. So many of us think of God as a God who is fair, but because of Jesus, he wasn't. What I mean by that is that some of us have believed in this kind of God that's fair without even knowing it, maybe leaning on our own actions, thinking that if we send good out into the universe, it'll boomerang and come back to us, or if someone sends bad out into the universe, it'll come right back to them. We think that if it's up to us, if someone messes up, to make sure they get canceled or that everyone knows about it and make sure they live in the suffering and punishment of that mistake forever. All you have to do is go to a Little League baseball game to know that fairness is the way of our land. But there's something about Jesus that sets him apart from any other spiritual or religious system. He was on a completely different playing field, and it's why he kept getting into trouble with so many people. See, Jesus comes onto the scene and he shakes things up because in his kingdom, it was no longer about an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, and he displays this truth so perfectly in the story that we're going to look at tonight, this parable that he broadcasted in Luke chapter 15 called The Compassionate Father. So if you have your Bible, I would love to invite you to turn to Luke chapter 15, and we're going to start really quickly in verses 1 through 2 as we get going. Verse 1, now all the tax collectors and sinners were coming to hear him, but the Pharisees and the experts in the law were complaining. This man welcomes sinners and eats with them. I think the tone here is super important, and the word just before the quotation, because it didn't just say, they said, because that would be maybe like, this man welcomes sinners, he eats with them. That was not what was happening. Can't you hear the tone in this text? This man welcomes sinners, and he eats with them. See, in Jesus' community, all outsiders are welcome. The ones on the margins were the ones that he healed. The shamed were the ones that he ran to. This was Jesus' kingdom crew, and Israel's leaders are watching and criticizing, and so he starts throwing dinner parties as a symbol of what God's kingdom really looked like. That he was here for the sick, for the poor, and the people who could never pay him back. And you can almost hear them through the paper. Can you believe Jesus is associating with them? What did they do to get near him? Imagine the person you can't stand the most, and Jesus would eat with them. Some of you are like, that is bad news. I know. See, it's so easy for us to judge the Pharisees, but imagine the person either that you only know through a screen or that you know up close, and just the sight of them makes your skin crawl. Jesus would eat with them. Maybe for you, you've done something that's gotten you canceled, and it feels like you just cannot get another chance no matter what you do. Jesus would eat with you. See, according to Jesus, sinners were the people he always wanted to be around. And so he starts telling these stories. The first two you walk through this morning, and he's talking to two crowds: the tax collector sinner crowd and the Pharisees, experts in the law crowd. And I talked about this earlier, but while we might know this story as the prodigal son, I like to think of it as the compassionate father, because it really is a story about how a dad responds to two sons that are lost. And I think his responses are pretty surprising. See, in verses 11 through 32, he tells this story to the two different kinds of people that would have been sitting right in front of him: the Pharisees and the tax collectors. And he's talking about both of them in this story to try to display what God's love is really like. And he starts here in verse 11. Then Jesus said, "A man had two sons. The younger of them said to his father, 'Father, give me the share of the estate that will belong to me.' So he divided his assets between them." We really already need to stop, because this would have been the equivalent of the son going up to the dad, and just imagine this, if you will, and saying, "Dad, I wish you were dead." Would that go well for any of you? No, it would not. See, it would not have been an ordinary custom for someone to get an inheritance before a parent's death. That was for something that was left behind. And the dad would have had to sell off his land to give this to him. And in this society, people's land was their identity. They gained status by how much they owned. So the younger son is basically asking him to tear his life apart, and he does, leaving the dad with only 2/3 of the estate. So let's see what happens next in verse 13. After a few days, the younger son gathered together all he had and left on a journey to a distant country, and there he squandered his wealth with a wild lifestyle. The word squandered is really like it would have been a graphic word, meaning to scatter or just to waste. I don't know if you've ever wasted something or waited for a long time and then just seen something just go away like that. I think of when I was in 5th grade, I had been saving for months to get a Tamagotchi. I know, they have made a comeback, and I do not get it, but I am here for it. And so I saved, I don't even know how long. It felt like a year. It was probably 2 weeks for a Tamagotchi. And I fed this little thing, this little digital food, and I was just like committed to this thing staying alive until I was in high school. I had big ambitions. And so I go to my friend Sarah's house one day, and we're at her pool in the backyard, and don't you know what Sarah did? She did. She picked up that Tamagotchi and threw it straight in the pool. I know. See, this is what I'm saying. My husband doesn't think it's that big a deal. I'm like, dude, she threw my Tamagotchi in the pool. We did not last very long as friends, but that Tamagotchi just toast. It said goodbye. It was not like the new Apple watches. It just was like, that is it. Water has hit me. Or maybe for some of you, it's like when you go on a trip and your parents or your grandparents, maybe even this trip this week, give you spending money, right? And on day one, you're like, I'm rich! And you spend it all. Some of you are like just now realizing how many days left you have to go. It'd be like that, but for his whole life. Wasted, scattered. Let's keep going in verse 14. Then after he spent everything, a severe famine took place in that country, and he began to be in need. So he went and looked for one of the citizens of that country, who sent him to the fields to feed pigs. He was longing to eat the carob pods the pigs were eating, but no one gave him anything. Something to note, to a Jewish man, being sent to feed pigs would have been an incredible insult. Because it's not only just that they're pigs, but for him, pigs would not have been kosher. They were unclean. And carob pods are from a carob tree. They were like this bean-like food, not like something that you would like get at Chipotle that's like, ooh, yum, with cilantro. No, like gross, just beans that are only meant for fattening up cows or for people who were poor for just like basic sustenance. That's what he's eating in a feeding trough. So imagine this. He's broke. He's starving. His face is in a feeding trough. And he is far away from anyone who knows him. The story continues. But when he came to his senses, he said, "How many of my father's hired workers have enough food to spare, but here I am, dying from hunger? I will get up and go to my father and say to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Treat me like one of your hired workers.' So he got up and went to his father. But while he was still a long way from home, his father saw him. His heart went out to him. He ran and hugged his son and kissed him. And then he said, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son.' And pay attention to what the father does next. But the father said to his servants, 'Hurry, bring the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Bring the fattened calf and kill it. Let us eat and celebrate, because this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found.' And so they began to celebrate." See, we might think here that the father would say, "Oh, sure, there he comes, crawling back to daddy. Needs more food, needs more clothes." Or we think the dad is like really, really ticked off, like, "Oh, yeah, okay, sure, there you come." But he runs toward him. And there are a few little details that make this even more crazy. Number one, an ancient Middle Eastern patriarch did not run. Children ran, youth ran, women might have run, but for men to run would have looked very undignifying. They would have had to pull up their clothes, run, looking really, really messy, not dignified anymore, and he runs toward him. He shows complete ridiculous love at just the sight of his son. And then the second thing that stands out to me is that the word for hugged here was like that he fell on his neck. Some of you are like, "Oh, that's because you didn't grow up in a family that hugs you, maybe." But like to fall on your neck, like he missed him so much, he hugged his neck as if he was falling on it. When I first started dating my husband, it took me a very long time to get used to his family's level of closeness. His family, they are a hugging family, and my family's hugging style was that we did not have one. And I was super loved as a kid by my family, but physical affection was not it for us. It was like a wave to say goodbye, or like maybe a like, but we did not full embrace hug. And so when I'm dating my husband, his name's Kyle, we go to his cousin's wedding. And we were still in that phase of like trying to figure out, like, is this forever? We'd been dating like, I don't know, about a year or something. And I kid you not, I was hugged more at this one wedding than I had been hugged in like a decade by friends and family. It was startling. I mean, the experience was just a lot to take in. And I was hugged multiple times by like the same people. You know what I mean? Like it was like, "Hi again." And then when we're leaving, it's like we can't just say one goodbye, we have to say 10 goodbyes. But I like to refer to it as the Gloystein family hug. That's his mom's maiden name. It was like a crack a rib type of hug. We're like, "Am I going to die in here?" You know? That's what I picture in this hug, like a full, undignified, might crack a rib embrace. But not only that, not only does he run and does he hug, he brings out the fattened calf, which would have only been reserved for huge religious celebrations, not an intimate family gathering. And then he puts a ring on his finger, a robe on his shoulders, and sandals on his feet. See, the ring is significant because it would have been a signet ring with his family's seal on it. And back then, you didn't make a contract by signing something, you put the family seal on a ring. The son is saying, I do not deserve to be brought back into this family. I do not deserve this. And the dad is saying, I'm not going to let you. And treats him like a son. Did you know that some other world religions have taken this story and rewritten it with their message? This is such a popular story that many other world religions have taken this story and rewritten it to display their message. The one that stands out to me the most, and I want to peek into tonight, is in Buddhist tradition, this story was rewritten. And I think it speaks volumes to the contrast of who Jesus is. See, in the Buddhist version of the lost son, a son leaves home and he has no plan to return. And when he leaves, he's like poor middle class. And he goes from town to town and he begs for money, looks for food, and the older he gets, the needier he becomes. But one day, he stumbles on his dad's house, and now the dad is wealthy. And he sees his dad way up high, and he recognizes him just barely because now his dad looks refined and is wearing nice clothes, and he is so scared, he runs away. No one in the house knew who he was, but the dad saw him, and the dad recognized him and pretended to not know him. He's homeless, and he's desperate, and so he comes back home to his dad's palace, but he comes back disguised as someone else. His father knew it was him, but he did not address him as his son, pretended not to know him. This would be like if you dropped out of college, lost everything, got all Fs, got fired from your job, you're at your lowest point, and you come back home, and your parents say, you can't even sleep on the sidewalk. I do not know you. Like, get out of here. So he ends up staying, but he stays in a way that he's got to work really, really hard to earn a spot on the land. It'd be like if you just had to mow the lawn for years and years and years just to stay at your parents' house. And he had to prove himself. So one day, the father goes out and he finds him, and he gets down on his level. And this is what he says to his son: get on with your work and don't be lazy. The son then spends 20 more years working in the field, and just before his father died, his father finally confesses that he knew it was him all along, but that he needed to see him earn his way back to their house. Why do I tell you this? I tell you this because I don't think actually many of us know the God of the Bible. Because some of us maybe have been sold this rewrite without even knowing it. That maybe we think if there even is a God, he is more like this. That he is distant, that he is cold, that he would pretend to not know us, that he surely doesn't care about what we're going through, that he thinks we deserve punishment. And maybe you think this for very good reasons. Maybe you think this because you grew up with someone, an authority figure who felt like that. And so the idea of a compassionate father feels like a joke to you. Or maybe you grew up in a religious or church setting that told you told you over and over again that God is mad at you. But that's not the God of the Bible. I think some of us might even prefer this rewrite, either because we can't understand the real compassion of God in light of what we've done, or because we think everyone needs to earn their way into God's love. Let's go back to Jesus' version of the story, because I want us to see the older brother's reaction. Verse 25, now his older son was in the field. As he came and approached the house, he heard music and dancing, so he called one of the servants and asked what was happening. The servant replied, your brother has returned, and your father has killed the fattened calf because he got his son back safe and sound. But the older son became angry and refused to go in. His father came out and appealed to him, but he answered his father, look, These many years I have worked like a servant for you, and I never disobeyed your commands, yet you never gave me even a goat so that I could celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours came back, who has devoured your assets with prostitutes, you killed the fattened calf for him. You can hear the desperation in his voice, like, this is not fair. And it would be so easy to make this story only about the younger son, but that's only Act 1. See, the original listeners of this parable would not have heard this story and been like, oh my gosh, that's amazing. They would have been annoyed. They would have been offended, like, that's all it takes? What? Jesus' purpose wasn't just to point out God's grace to sinners, but to draw attention to the older brother's response to grace. Did you notice? The brother doesn't respectfully call him father. You can see it in the text. He just says, look. He is disrespectfully, just doesn't address him, look. And then did you also notice? The older brother does not recognize him as his brother. What does he call him? What does he call him? Your son. Like, I am not claiming this kid. He is yours. He is not my brother. He is your son. Look what your son did. He won't even acknowledge being in the same family with him. He's furious, and he would have been particularly upset because this delicacy they're having, what did that come from? Probably his future inheritance. He's still thinking about things too, just in a very different way. Let's see what his dad says to him. Verse 31, then the father said to him, son, you are always with me, and everything that belongs to me is yours. It was appropriate to celebrate and be glad, for your brother was dead and is alive. He was lost and is found. He repeats what he said when he started the party for the younger son, but did you notice what he called his younger son this time? Your brother. He didn't say, this son of mine. He said, your brother was lost. He was dead, and now he's alive. He is ours. And the older brother is mad because this is not fair. I think some of you probably know the older brother well because if you are very honest in your heart of hearts, you read the first part of this story and you think, isn't this a little irresponsible? Like, what is this kid going to learn from this? You would never dare ask your parents for anything like this. And if you did, you definitely would do something smart with it. You definitely wouldn't waste it and then come crawling home. He's so annoyed, he can't even walk inside his home, acknowledge his brother. And in a twist now, the older brother is on the outside, and the younger brother is in. And that's why I think the rewrite appeals to some of us, because we want people to keep earning our love and our forgiveness, or even just the love of God. Maybe for you, this shows up in small ways. It doesn't have to just show up in big ones. Maybe a friend has betrayed you, and instead of being able to forgive that friend, you now, in that friend group, wish bad things on them and hope their friends betray them. Maybe for you, this shows up when someone gets something you feel like they don't deserve. They get into a college you wanted to get into, they get a grade you should have gotten. Or maybe it's bigger. You think someone has a life they shouldn't have, that you deserve. See, I think we can be in church most of our lives and actually miss the actual point, which is of no merit of our own. God loved us and sent his son to die for us. And nothing we can do, nothing that we do can make God love us more, and nothing that we do can make him love us any less. And when we act out the way of the older brother, we don't look anything like Jesus. Brian Stevenson, who's a lawyer for people on death row and author of Just Mercy, he says it this way: each of us is more than the worst thing we've ever done. We all need mercy, we all need justice, and perhaps we all need some measure of unmerited grace. I think this is why it's hard for those of us who are the younger brother to accept We know we don't deserve this kind of love. We know that we should feel like we've got to earn it back. But in Jesus' story of the compassionate Father, he says something no belief system had ever said. You do not have to do anything to inherit the love and the grace of God because Jesus did it for you. Remember what the Father said about the younger son? He said it twice. He was dead and is alive. He was lost and is found. He didn't say, your brother, that guy, he was a loser. He doesn't shame him. He doesn't say, you've got to now spend the rest of your life working in the field. Get on with your work. Don't be lazy. He ran to him, looking foolish, looking messy, throwing his arms around him. God is not fair. Thank God. The older brother's heart posture, though, is just as dangerous because it is so sneaky and it is so easy to hide. You can dress up your spirituality and hide behind an older brother heart for decades. It is terrifying. And this is why Jesus put the older brother in this story. Tim Keller says it like this: there are two ways to be lost. You can escape God by doing whatever you want, or by trying to be good on your own. And there are a lot of us walking around with older brother hearts, and we've dressed them up so that they don't look like anything but good. But if you in your heart of hearts say, I try really hard, I'm obedient, I do the right things, therefore God owes me a good life, Jesus might be someone you get advice from, but he is not your Savior. And I say that because following Jesus actually requires admitting that we are helpless. Paul writes it this way in the book of Romans, chapter 5, verse 6. When we were utterly helpless, Christ came at just the right time and died for us sinners. See, I think the non-Jesus version of this story is how a lot of us operate. We either believe we are not worthy of God's love, that he could never love someone like us, that all of this is for everyone but us, or that we are good on our own, and that we have to earn God's love, and you should too. And so I just want to ask you, deep down, what do you actually believe? Like, not what do your parents believe, not what do your grandparents believe, not what do your teachers believe. What do you believe about the love of God, about who God is? Do you believe we are too sinful or broken to receive God's mercy, or that because we do good things, we deserve a good life in heaven? See, I'm worried that some of you have been sold a rewrite and you don't know it, and you think there might be a God, but he is on a chair very far away, very distant, very cold, looking at you and everyone else with disgust, but that is not who God is. Jesus tells the story of a father who comes close, who runs to his son, who forgives his son, who tries to bring his older son back into the party even after being humiliated by him. Skye Jethani describes it as 4 ways that we can relate to God. That instead of a life over God, or under God, or for God, through Jesus, we get a life with God. See, the thing about being an older and younger brother is that they are both exhausting roads, and I know because I've walked both. Rebellion is exhausting, and so is self-righteousness and pride. When I was in high school, I was known as the good girl. I had recently become a Christian, and several years before that, my parents had gotten divorced. And so there was this little part of me deep down that, if I was really honest, part of becoming a Christian for me at first was saying, God, if I am good, will you put my parents back together? Please. And God, if I do the right things and I impress the right people, will you make my family happy again, please? And so I did the right things. I was so good. And I just kept thinking, if I keep doing the right things, life's not going to be hard anymore, but that didn't happen. That would have been fair, but it wasn't what happened. So I ran far from God, both from the relationships that I entered into to the way I treated my body. I could not believe he had let my parents split up, but not only that he'd let certain people come into my life and now into our home, and it felt like in a moment's notice, all of a sudden, we were this family now known for addiction and brokenness, and I was embarrassed. Like, God, where are you? Why aren't you doing anything? And I felt like all of my brokenness was on display, and I just kept running further and further, but then God, being so rich in mercy, through the love of my small group leader in high school, came to find me and loved me so much that even when I was dead in my sin, gave up his life for me because he raised Christ from the dead. And I realized that while he didn't cause any of the bad things to happen, he was also a God that promised to redeem and restore every broken thing, and that he was with me in every moment. If I told you guys the stories of the way that he has pieced my family back together, it did not look like I wanted it to, but you would not believe it. The ways that he has redeemed my relationship with my parents, the way that he has restored wholeness to our family, it is only God. He didn't promise to wave a magical wand over my life, but he did promise he would be with us in every step. I did not have to earn his love because he just loved me, period. And what I didn't know about God then that now I know is that nothing I could do could make him love me anymore, and nothing that I had done had made him love me any less. He just loved me, and he just loves you. Period. He just loves you. So what I want to ask you tonight is this. In this story, who are you? Who are you? See, some of you are sitting in the seat of the younger brother, and for whatever reason, maybe to no fault of your own, you have run far away, and you have no idea even how to get back. And maybe you've been numbing to get your mind off the pain of this life, and I want to tell you, I get it. I really get that. But I'm also here to tell you that the grace and mercy of God is for you too. Did you notice that the younger brother doesn't come home once he realizes his dad will accept him back, but he just comes home because he's starving? That's all you have to be. Hungry. You don't need to straighten up your life. He just wants you home. But some of you are in a different seat, and you've been in the seat of the older brother, and maybe you've been in the back row for a while now, metaphorically or literally with your arms crossed, because you've been there, heard this, heard that. You're good on your own. But if you were honest, this never stop earning, never stop achieving life is exhausting you too, and deep down, you're ready to come home. Here's the thing about God. He can't change who we pretend to be. He just asks us to come home as we are and to let him transform us. We do not have to pretend to be anything else but who we are, because guess what? He already knows. He's with you every step. He knows every hair on your head, every sin, every choice, every victory, every tear. He already knows you. Remember what I told you about how the father responded to the younger son, that he put sandals on his feet, a robe on his shoulder, and a ring on his hand. The ring was his way of saying, you do not have to work for this. You don't have to earn your way back to my love. You are my son. You are home with me. And what I want you to know is that when you stand in that identity, when the truest thing about you is the love God has for you, you are so free. You are the freest you will ever be. When that is the thing you know down to your bones, that the love of God is for you, you are so free. Because when you do mess up again, and you probably will, you won't run and hide in a cave of shame. You will run back to the Father knowing He just wants you home. When this is the truest thing about you, and someone makes you feel worthless, or like you're not worthy of love, you will remember that to Jesus, you were worth everything. Everything. And when you want to run away, and you will, you can remember that our God is the kind of God who told a story about a father who ran to his son and fell on his neck because that's how much he missed him. That's how much he loved him, to help us understand his love for us. That is our God. He is our home. He is our safe and secure place to land. There are two ways to be lost, and He just wants you home. Jesus, I thank you for a story that reminds us of who you are, your compassion and your mercy. And God, I pray tonight for those of us who are ready to come home, that will be willing to just come home, hungry for you. Amen.